"Grandma, when do we get the trust money?" My granddaughter's question floated across the dining room so casually that, for a moment, I thought I had misheard her. The laughter around the table faded into a strange silence. Forks stopped moving. Glasses hovered halfway to lips. I looked up from the slice of birthday cake sitting on my plate and saw something I hadn't expected to see on my 71st birthday. No one looked surprised by the question. They looked uncomfortable. There's a difference. I'm Eleanor Whitmore, and until that moment, I believe my family saw me as a mother, a grandmother, and the widow who had spent decades keeping everyone together. That evening, I began to wonder if they saw me as something else entirely. The dining room was warm with soft yellow light. My house smelled like vanilla frosting and fresh coffee. Family photographs lined the walls, each one capturing a memory I had cherished for years. Ryan sat near the end of the table, his broad shoulders relaxed beneath a navy sweater. Across from him, Sabrina wore the same practiced smile she brought to every family gathering. Olivia sat beside them, her face turning red as she realized everyone had gone quiet. "Olivia," Sabrina said gently, though there was tension beneath her voice, "that's not really something we discuss at the dinner table." Olivia shrugged. "I was just asking. Dad said the trust is a big deal." My eyes moved toward Ryan. He immediately reached for his water glass. He wouldn't look at me. That small gesture settled heavily in my chest. For years, I had told myself that distance naturally grows as children build their own lives. They get busy. They have responsibilities. They call less often. They visit less frequently. I accepted all of that because I loved my son. But sitting there, surrounded by family, I suddenly felt like an outsider listening to a conversation that had been happening without me. "What trust money?" I asked lightly, forcing a smile. "I'm still here." A few people laughed. The sound felt strained. Sabrina quickly changed the subject and began talking about an upcoming vacation. The conversation recovered, but something had shifted. I could feel it lingering beneath every word spoken afterward. Every now and then, I caught someone glancing in my direction. Not with affection, not with concern, with calculation. The evening continued. Candles flickered. Coffee cups emptied. Plates were cleared away. Everyone acted normal. Yet the question remained in my mind. When do we get the trust money? Not if, not someday. When? As though my assets had already become a family project waiting for approval. Around 9 o'clock, the guests began leaving. Hugs were exchanged. Promises were made about future visits. Ryan kissed my cheek before heading toward the door. "Happy birthday, Mom." "Thank you, sweetheart." He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Sabrina hugged me next. "Wonderful dinner, Eleanor." Her voice was warm. Her eyes were not. Soon the house grew quiet. The silence settled into every room like a heavy blanket. I carried dishes into the kitchen and loaded them into the dishwasher one plate at a time. The birthday balloons tied to the dining chairs swayed gently in the air conditioning. A few crumbs remained on the tablecloth, ordinary signs of an ordinary celebration. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. At 10:30, I poured myself a cup of decaf coffee and carried it into my study. The old oak desk stood exactly where my husband had placed it 20 years earlier. Above it hung a framed photograph of us standing beside a lake during our 40th wedding anniversary trip. I looked at his smile and felt a familiar ache. Then I opened the bottom drawer. Inside sat a thick folder containing documents I had not reviewed in years. The family trust. My fingers rested on the cover. Suddenly, Olivia's question echoed through my mind again. I stared at the folder for a long moment before finally opening it. Whatever my family believed about my future, I intended to discover the truth for myself. The folder felt heavier than paper should have felt. I sat at my desk long after midnight, turning pages that I had not looked at in years. My late husband, Charles, had always handled the details. After he passed away, I kept everything organized, paid the bills, met with accountants when necessary, and trusted that the structure we created would remain exactly as intended. The trust was straightforward. It protected the house, several investment accounts, and a few properties Charles and I had purchased over the decades. Nothing extravagant, just the result of a lifetime of careful decisions, early mornings, postponed vacations, and years spent building something stable. My coffee grew cold beside me as I read. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. A street lamp cast a pale glow across the front lawn. Somewhere in the distance, A dog barked once, and then everything returned to silence. I should have gone to bed. Instead, I kept reading. The next morning, I woke later than usual. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows as I prepared breakfast. 1 egg, a slice of toast, and a cup of coffee. The same breakfast I had eaten for years. Yet something felt different. Olivia's question had opened a door in my mind, and now I could not close it. As I sat at the kitchen table, memories began surfacing. Small moments. Comments I had dismissed at the time. Last Thanksgiving, Sabrina had asked whether maintaining such a large house was becoming difficult for me. At Christmas, Ryan wondered aloud whether downsizing might be practical. A few months earlier, Sabrina had asked if I still remembered where all the financial documents were stored. Each question had seemed harmless, reasonable even, but viewed together, they formed a pattern I had never noticed before. I carried my coffee into the living room and stared at a framed photograph of Ryan as a boy. He could not have been older than 10. He stood beside Charles holding a fishing rod nearly as tall as he was. Back then, my son would run through the front door after school and tell me everything about his day before he even took off his backpack. Somewhere along the way, life became more complicated. Or perhaps people simply became more careful about what they revealed. Around noon, my phone rang. Sabrina. I watched her name appear on the screen before answering. Hello, Sabrina. Good afternoon, Eleanor. I just wanted to thank you again for dinner last night. Everyone had such a lovely time. Her voice sounded cheerful, polished. I am glad everyone enjoyed it. There was a brief pause. By the way, have you given any more thought to your retirement plans? I looked out the window. A squirrel darted across the yard. Retirement plans? I asked. You know, travel. Maybe moving somewhere smaller. Less maintenance. I smiled to myself. There it was again. Another gentle question wrapped in concern. No major decisions at the moment, I replied. I am quite happy where I am. Another pause followed. Slightly longer this time. Well, that is wonderful. We just want what is best for you. After we ended the call, I set my phone down and remained still for several minutes. The house felt unusually quiet. Not lonely. Watchful. By late afternoon, I found myself opening my email inbox. Most messages were routine advertisements, newsletters, and appointment reminders. Then I noticed an old family group message from several weeks earlier. Ryan, Sabrina, and a few relatives had been discussing vacation schedules. As I skimmed through the thread, one sentence caught my attention. It was brief, easy to overlook, yet I read it 3 times. Sabrina had written, "Everything will make more sense once the trust situation is settled." My stomach tightened. I stared at the screen, reading the sentence again and again. Settled. Not someday. Not eventually. Settled. As though conversations had already taken place without me. As though decisions were already being imagined. For the first time, I began to wonder what else had been discussed when I was not in the room. For the next few days, I tried to convince myself that I was overthinking everything. Families talked about finances. Adult children worried about the future. Perhaps I was turning ordinary conversations into something larger because I was still adjusting to life without Charles. That explanation comforted me for exactly one afternoon. On Thursday evening, Olivia called unexpectedly. She sounded distracted. "Grandma, did you get the pictures I sent from campus?" she asked. "Not yet, sweetheart. That is strange. I sent them yesterday." A few minutes later, a notification appeared in my inbox. Olivia apologized and said she had resent everything. After we hung up, I opened the message. There were photographs of her dorm room, her roommate, and a student art exhibit she had visited. I smiled as I looked through them. Then I noticed an attachment at the bottom. It was not labeled as a photo. It appeared to be a forwarded email chain. I assumed it had been attached by mistake. I almost deleted it. Instead, I clicked. What opened on my screen made my heart slow to a crawl. The message was several weeks old. Ryan had started the conversation. Sabrina and 2 relatives were included. At first, the discussion seemed harmless. They talked about travel plans, scheduling family events, and coordinating birthdays. Then the subject changed. The house was mentioned. My house. One relative asked whether the property would be sold eventually. Ryan replied that there were several possibilities. Sabrina responded a few minutes later. Once everything is settled, the equity alone changes the picture completely. Another message followed. The trust is the key piece. I stared at the words. The room around me seemed unusually still. A grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. Every ordinary sound suddenly felt amplified. I continued reading. One relative asked whether any decisions had been finalized. Sabrina answered before Ryan could respond. Not officially, but we have discussed what makes the most sense. We, not Eleanor, not Mom. We. I read the exchange again, then a third time. No one had included me in these discussions. No one had asked what I wanted. They spoke as though the future of my home and finances had already become a group project. The most painful part was not the money. It was the assumption. Somewhere along the way, people I loved had stopped viewing me as the owner of my own life. They had begun viewing me as an obstacle standing between them and something they expected to receive. I closed the email and leaned back in my chair. The framed photograph of Charles sat on the bookshelf nearby. His expression carried the same calm confidence I remembered so well. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. Nearly 10 years earlier, after attending a friend's estate planning seminar, Charles had come home thoughtful and quiet. That evening he said something I never forgot. The real test of character comes when people start counting money that is not theirs. At the time, I laughed. It sounded cynical. Now, sitting alone in my study, those words felt less like cynicism and more like experience. I opened the email one final time. Near the bottom was a sentence from Sabrina that made my stomach tighten. It was short, casual, almost careless. Everything will be easier once the trust situation is resolved. Resolved. As though my future was a problem waiting for a solution. I saved the entire email chain into a separate folder. Then I shut down my computer and sat quietly in the darkness for several minutes. For the first time, I stopped wondering whether something was wrong. The question had changed. Now I wanted to know how much I did not know. The following morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock in the hallway. I wrapped a cardigan around my shoulders and stood at the kitchen window while the sky slowly turned from dark blue to pale gray. For years, mornings had been my favorite part of the day. They felt honest. Before phone calls, appointments, and obligations, there was a brief moment when everything seemed clear. That morning, I needed clarity more than ever. I made coffee and carried the mug into the study. The email chain remained saved on my computer. I did not open it again. I already knew what it said. Instead, I found myself looking at old photographs. Charles had always been the practical one between us. While I focused on people, he focused on patterns. He noticed things long before anyone else did. Back then, I used to tease him for being cautious. Now I wondered how many warnings I had overlooked. One photograph showed us standing beside the first house we purchased together. We were young, exhausted, and proud. Another showed Ryan graduating from college. Charles had his arm around our son, smiling as though the future could only bring good things. We spent decades building a life centered around family. Every major decision was made with that goal in mind. We saved carefully. We paid our debts. We planned for the future. Not because we worshipped money, but because we believed stability was one of the greatest gifts parents could leave behind. Around mid-morning, another memory surfaced. Nearly 7 years earlier, Ryan had approached us about a business opportunity. He needed financial help. Charles listened patiently and asked detailed questions. When the meeting ended, he told me something that seemed harsh at the time. Helping someone is not the same thing as protecting them from consequences. Ryan eventually received a smaller amount than he requested. He was polite about it, but I remember the disappointment on his face. Looking back, that disappointment never completely disappeared. It simply became quieter. As the years passed, there were other moments. Small ones, easy to dismiss individually. Requests for loans that were never repaid. Conversations that seemed to drift toward finances. Occasional remarks from Sabrina about investments, property values, and inheritance taxes. At the time, I viewed those discussions as normal curiosity. Now they look different, like puzzle pieces scattered across a table, finally forming a recognizable image. I spent most of the afternoon organizing paperwork, tax records, property documents, investment statements. Everything was exactly where it should have been. The order brought me comfort. Facts had a way of cutting through uncertainty. Late in the day, I opened an old file cabinet and found a yellow folder labeled estate planning. Charles's handwriting covered the front. Inside were notes from meetings with attorneys held years ago. As I flipped through the pages, one sentence highlighted in blue ink immediately caught my attention. It was written in Charles's unmistakable handwriting. Never assume intentions. Verify them. I sat motionless for several seconds. It felt less like a note and more like a message waiting patiently across the years. By evening, I had reached a conclusion. I was finished guessing. I was finished explaining away things that made no sense. If conversations about my future were taking place without me, I needed facts rather than suspicions. I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a familiar name. Thomas Bennett, the attorney Charles had trusted for decades. My finger hovered above the number for a moment before I pressed call. As the line began to ring, I looked around the quiet study and felt something unexpected settle inside me. Not anger, not fear, determination. Thomas answered on the third ring. His voice sounded exactly as I remembered. Calm, measured, and impossible to rush. Eleanor, he said warmly. It has been too long. We exchanged a few pleasantries before I asked whether he had time to meet. Something in my tone must have reached him because he immediately offered an appointment the following morning. The next day, I drove across town beneath a sky filled with low gray clouds. Thomas's office occupied the second floor of a brick building that had stood there for decades. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and old books. It felt reassuring, stable, familiar. The receptionist greeted me by name and led me into a conference room overlooking a small park. A few minutes later, Thomas entered carrying a thick legal pad. He shook my hand and sat across from me. Tell me what is going on. For nearly an hour, I explained everything. Olivia's question at my birthday dinner, the comments about the trust, the email chain, the growing feeling that conversations about my future were happening without my knowledge. Thomas listened without interrupting. Occasionally, he wrote a note. Occasionally, he nodded. When I finished, he folded his hands together and looked at me carefully. Do you still have the emails? Yes. Good. Send them to me. I slid printed copies across the table. He adjusted his glasses and began reading. The room became quiet except for the sound of turning pages. I watched his expression closely. Thomas was not a dramatic man. He did not gasp. He did not frown. Yet I noticed something subtle. The longer he read, the more serious he became. After several minutes, he placed the papers down and leaned back in his chair. Eleanor, I think you were right to come in. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Why? He chose his words carefully. Because these discussions appear far more developed than simple family speculation. I remained silent. What exactly does that mean? Thomas opened another folder containing trust documents. He compared several pages before speaking again. Over the last year, there have been inquiries regarding trust administration procedures. I stared at him. Inquiries from whom? I cannot identify every source with certainty. Some were general requests. Some came through third parties. However, the pattern suggests significant interest in understanding access, distribution timelines, and property management. The words landed heavily. This was not curiosity. This was preparation. Thomas continued reviewing documents. Occasionally, he highlighted a passage or made another note. Finally, he looked up. There is something else you should know. My hands tightened around my coffee cup. What? The trust remains entirely under your control. No beneficiary has authority over these assets while you are alive and competent. Legally speaking, every major decision remains yours. Relief washed through me, but it lasted only a moment. Because another realization followed immediately. If my family already understood that fact, then their conversations made even less sense. Thomas seemed to recognize the thought forming in my mind. People sometimes become attached to future expectations, he said quietly. The problem begins when expectations start feeling like entitlements. The room fell silent. Outside the window, leaves drifted across the sidewalk in the autumn wind. Thomas closed the file and slid it toward me. At this point, I recommend caution. Observe. Gather information. Do not make assumptions, but do not ignore what you have already seen. I nodded slowly. As our meeting ended, he handed me a copy of several updated trust provisions. Before I left, he added one final sentence. If circumstances continue developing in this direction, there are legal tools available to protect both your assets and your intentions. On the drive home, I thought about those words. Legal tools. Protect your intentions. For the first time since my birthday dinner, I felt something shift. The uncertainty was fading. In its place was a growing understanding that whatever was happening behind the scenes had been unfolding for much longer than I had realized. Over the next 2 weeks, I followed Thomas's advice. I did not confront anyone. I did not mention the emails. I did not change my routine. Every morning, I watered the flowers on the back patio, read the newspaper, and took my usual walk through the neighborhood. On the surface, nothing had changed. Underneath, I was paying attention in a way I never had before. It was remarkable what people revealed when they believed you were not looking. One Sunday afternoon, Ryan and Sabrina came over for lunch. The autumn air was cool, and the maple tree in my front yard had begun turning shades of gold and crimson. We ate chicken salad sandwiches on the patio and talked about ordinary things. Olivia's classes, local traffic, a new restaurant that had opened downtown. Then, almost casually, I decided to test something. I have been thinking about making some changes, I said while setting down my iced tea. Ryan looked up immediately. Changes? Nothing dramatic, I replied. Just reviewing long-term plans. There are a few charities I have supported for years. I have been considering increasing my involvement. For a brief moment, Sabrina's smile froze. The expression disappeared so quickly that most people would have missed it. I did not. Charities? She asked. That sounds generous. I have been fortunate in life, I said. It feels right to help where I can. Ryan shifted in his chair. How much help are we talking about? The question arrived too quickly, too directly. I took a sip of tea before answering. I have not decided. I am still exploring options. Silence settled across the table. Not an uncomfortable silence. A calculating one. The kind that follows unexpected information. A few minutes later, Sabrina changed the subject, but the easy atmosphere never fully returned. When they left that afternoon, I stood at the front window and watched their vehicle pull out of the driveway. Before turning onto the main road, it stopped briefly at the curb. The driver's side window lowered. Ryan and Sabrina appeared to be talking intensely about something. Then they drove away. That evening, my phone rang. Ryan. Hi, Mom. Hello, sweetheart. His voice sounded unusually cautious. I was thinking about what you mentioned earlier. About the charities? Yes. He hesitated. I just hope you are being careful. There are a lot of organizations that take advantage of older people. I almost smiled. Concern had become the preferred disguise. Thank you for worrying about me, I said. I appreciate that. Another pause followed. Have you spoken with any advisors about these ideas? There it was. Another question hidden inside a question. I speak with advisors regularly, I replied. You know that. He laughed softly, but it sounded forced. After we ended the call, I sat quietly in the living room. The lamp beside my chair cast a warm circle of light across the carpet. Outside, darkness had settled over the neighborhood. Everything felt peaceful, yet pieces were continuing to fall into place. The next morning brought another surprise. An email arrived from Sabrina. It contained an article discussing estate planning and asset management. The message itself was brief. Thought you might find this interesting. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I opened a folder on my computer and saved a copy alongside the other documents. One by one, the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. The more I hinted that my plans might not match their expectations, the more interested they became. And for the first time, I began to suspect that the truth was even larger than I had imagined. 3 weeks after my meeting with Thomas, Ryan called and invited me to Sunday dinner at his house. His tone was unusually enthusiastic. Sabrina apparently spent the entire day preparing the meal. Olivia would be there as well. Under normal circumstances, I would have appreciated the invitation without a second thought. Instead, I found myself wondering why the sudden interest had appeared after months of growing distance. Still, I accepted. Sunday arrived with clear skies and cool temperatures. The drive across town took about 20 minutes. As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed several vehicles already parked outside. A few relatives had been invited too. That surprised me. Family dinners at Ryan's house were usually small gatherings. The moment I stepped inside, everyone seemed unusually attentive. People offered to take my coat. Someone refilled my water glass before it was half empty. Sabrina complimented my sweater twice within 10 minutes. The effort felt almost rehearsed. Throughout dinner, the conversation remained pleasant. We discussed holiday plans, local events, and Olivia's upcoming semester. Yet beneath the surface, I sensed everyone waiting for something. Eventually, dessert arrived. Sabrina placed a pie in the center of the table and sat down. A quiet pause settled over the room. Then Ryan cleared his throat. Mom, there is something I have been meaning to ask you. The room immediately grew still. I set down my fork and looked at him. What is it? He exchanged a quick glance with Sabrina before continuing. We have been talking about the future. There it was again. The future. Always the future. Never the present. Have you? I asked calmly. Well, yes. We are family. We try to think ahead. Sabrina nodded in agreement. Planning is important. I waited. Ryan leaned forward slightly. We just want to understand your intentions. That is all. I felt the familiar weight of Thomas's advice in the back of my mind. Observe. Listen. Do not rush. My intentions regarding what? Ryan hesitated. Sabrina answered instead. The estate. The properties. The trust. Several relatives suddenly became very interested in their coffee cups. No one interrupted. No one looked surprised by the subject. That told me more than any words could have. I folded my hands in my lap. Why do my intentions concern everyone so much? The question lingered in the air. Sabrina smiled politely. Because families should communicate. Of course, I said. Communication matters. Ryan shifted in his chair. We just think it would help everyone if expectations were clear. Expectations. The word landed harder than he intended. I looked around the table. Faces avoided my eyes. The atmosphere had changed. Completely. The dinner was no longer a family gathering. It had become a meeting. A discussion about assets disguised as concern. Tell me something, I said quietly. What expectations are you referring to? Ryan released a slow breath. Then, perhaps without realizing it, he finally said the thing no one had been willing to say aloud. Mom, eventually all of this becomes part of the family anyway. The sentence settled over the room like a heavy curtain. Nobody corrected him. Nobody disagreed. Sabrina simply sat there watching my reaction. In that moment, I understood something important. They no longer viewed the trust as my responsibility. They viewed it as their future possession. The distinction mattered more than money ever could. I remained calm. I smiled politely. I even finished my coffee before leaving. But as I drove home beneath the fading evening light, one thought stayed with me. The masks were beginning to slip, and what I was seeing underneath was impossible to ignore. The morning after dinner at Ryan's house, I called Thomas. He asked only one question before scheduling a meeting. Has anything changed? I stood at my kitchen window looking out at the backyard where Charles and I had planted rose bushes nearly 20 years earlier. Most of the blooms were gone for the season, but a few stubborn flowers remained. Yes, I said. I believe I finally understand what is happening. 2 days later, I sat across from Thomas in the same conference room. The stack of documents on the table seemed thicker than before. He listened as I described every detail of the dinner conversation. Ryan's comments, Sabrina's questions, the way everyone at the table had reacted as though future ownership of my assets was already an accepted fact. When I finished, Thomas remained quiet for several moments. Then he opened a folder and slid a document toward me. You have options, he said. I read the first page carefully. The language was formal, but the meaning was clear. Additional protections could be added. Distribution provisions could be modified. Access could be restricted. Control could remain entirely where it belonged. With me, what would you do? I asked. Thomas smiled faintly. My job is not to tell you what to do. My job is to make sure your intentions are protected. Intentions. The same word he had used before. For years, I had assumed my intentions were obvious. Take care of family. Preserve what Charles and I built. Leave something meaningful behind. But intentions only matter when they are respected. I looked down at the paperwork again. Suddenly, the decision felt simpler than I expected. This was not about punishment. It was not about revenge. It was about ensuring that my life's work remained aligned with my values rather than someone else's expectations. Over the following week, I reviewed every document, every account, every property, every provision. I spent hours sitting at the dining room table with reading glasses perched on my nose and legal papers spread around me. Outside, autumn continued its slow march toward winter. Leaves drifted across the lawn. The evenings arrived earlier each day. Inside the house, something else was changing. For the first time in months, I felt calm. The uncertainty was disappearing because facts had replaced assumptions. One afternoon, I returned to Thomas's office and signed the final paperwork. My hand moved steadily across each page. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Certain trust provisions were frozen. Distribution pathways were revised. Additional safeguards were established. Future access would depend entirely upon standards that reflected my wishes, not anyone else's expectations. When the final signature was complete, Thomas collected the documents and placed them into a file. "Everything is in place," he said. I nodded. Walking back to my car, I expected to feel sadness. Instead, I felt relief. The sky overhead was bright blue. A cool breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves through the parking lot. For months, I had been reacting to clues, questions, and suspicions. Now I had acted. Quietly, legally, deliberately. The following Friday evening, as I settled into my favorite chair with a book, my phone buzzed on the side table. Then it buzzed again, and again. 3 messages within less than 2 minutes. I looked at the screen. Ryan. Sabrina. Ryan again. Slowly, I set the book aside. Something told me that somewhere, somehow, they had just learned that the future they had been discussing was no longer unfolding the way they expected. The first call came from Ryan. I let it ring. The second came less than a minute later. Then Sabrina called. Then another message appeared. I looked at the screen glowing beside my chair and felt none of the anxiety I might have felt a month earlier. Instead, I quietly picked up my bookmark, placed it between the pages of my novel, and set the book aside. Outside, the wind rattled a few remaining leaves against the windows. Inside, the house felt peaceful. Eventually, I answered. "Hello, Ryan." His voice was tight. "Mom, we need to talk." "About what?" A brief silence followed. "I received some information today." "Did you?" I asked. "Yes." Another pause. Apparently, there have been changes. There it was. Not concern about my well-being. Not curiosity about my plans. Changes. I glanced toward the photograph of Charles resting on the bookshelf. "There have been updates," I replied calmly. "That is correct." Ryan exhaled sharply. "Why would you do something like that without discussing it with the family?" The question told me everything. Without discussing it with the family. As though permission had been required. As though decisions about my own assets belonged to a committee. "Because they are my decisions to make," I answered. The line became very quiet. A few moments later, Sabrina joined the call. Her voice remained polite, but the warmth I had heard for years seemed noticeably absent. "Eleanor, we are just confused." "About what?" "About why all of this happened so suddenly." I looked around the room. The grandfather clock continued its steady rhythm. The lamp beside my chair cast a soft glow across the carpet. Everything felt remarkably ordinary. "It was not sudden," I said. "It simply became necessary." Neither of them responded immediately. For months, they had spoken about the future as though it were already theirs to organize. Now they were confronting a reality they had never considered. The future was still mine. Over the next several days, there were more calls. More questions. More attempts to reopen conversations that should never have existed in the first place. I remained polite. I remained calm. Most importantly, I remained consistent. I did not argue. I did not accuse anyone of greed. I did not mention the emails or the discussions I had discovered. I simply repeated the truth. My estate planning reflected my intentions. Nothing more. Nothing less. A week later, Olivia stopped by unexpectedly. She brought coffee and a box of pastries from a bakery near her campus. We sat together in the kitchen while afternoon sunlight filled the room. Eventually, she looked down at her coffee cup. "Grandma, everybody is upset." I smiled gently. "I know." She hesitated. "Are you?" I considered the question carefully. Then I shook my head. "No, sweetheart. I am not upset." And it was true. Disappointed, perhaps. Wiser, certainly. But not upset. Because somewhere along the way, I had stopped focusing on what others expected from me and started protecting what Charles and I had spent a lifetime building. That evening, after Olivia left, I walked through the house turning on lamps as dusk settled outside. The rooms felt exactly the same as they always had. The photographs remained on the walls. The memories remained intact. The life Charles and I created remained mine to steward. I paused beside his photograph one last time before heading upstairs. Years earlier, he told me that money reveals character. I finally understood what he meant. In the end, I did not leave anyone with nothing. I left them with the consequences of believing that my future belonged to them before I was finished living.